Hi YouTube, Brian Phillips here. Cessna 182 UMX flap mod video part 3. And what we've got here in front of us is a spread of different hinges and hardware. And I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do. Obviously, at this point we kind of have the electronics in a spot where we're waiting for where they need to physically sit. So our next step is going to be to actually cut hinges, or cut flaps out and then hinge them. Now, one thing about this that's complicated is if I want to try to make it as scale as possible, which you know me, I'll overcomplicate the simplest of tasks. I'm going to have to do Fowler flaps. So for that, I'll just draw a picture because it's easier to draw a little picture than it is to try to explain it. So a regular flap, okay, comes off the end of the airfoil just like this, okay, and it falls down something like this, and it's hinged right there, okay. A Fowler flap is shaped like a wing, okay, and it goes something like this on the airfoil, okay. So a lot of times there's some sort of a hinge mechanism on RC world that hinges somewhere down here. Now on the more complicated, of course, they're going to be inside the plane and they'll shoot out this way. But what that does is it, drawn a little bit larger, as the flap deploys, then you get this area for, you know, the air to pass through. And what that does is it helps to really make for an efficient reduction in stall speed. So this is probably fine, but of course I want to overcomplicate things. And of course, in order to make this gap the easiest way, we're going to have a more complicated flap system, or a more complicated hinge. So, but one trouble, in fact, I can show you on this Cirrus. As the Cirrus flap deploys, which it's not going to let me deploy. Same thing's true on the Timber. And on a lot of different flap mechanisms, Fowler flaps are very common. So the trouble with a Fowler flap on such a small plane is look how thin this is. We're talking about a very thin, we're only talking maybe 4 or 5 millimeters or 1/4 inch or so. In fact, I should measure it. This will help demonstrate my point. I'm sort of reluctant to even do this because it's going to bite the foam. So yeah, it's close to a 1/4 inch. So 1/4 inch being like 5 or 6 millimeters. And that's just not very much material to work with. So normally I would just cut and then just do it. But in this case, it'd be really cool if I could get an angle in. And that means I have to heat this, cut it, and then dig it at an angle, and then hold it and cut. But by the time I accomplish that, I will have marred up the finish horribly. So I think I'm just going to take a brand new number 11 X-Acto knife, and I'm going to cut here. The other thing about a Fowler flap that's that's going to hurt us on this plane is because we're giving up structural integrity of the wing by removing this connection point here. If we go with a conventional fold down flap, then we're going to have a lot more contact area, and then we can depend on this to actually provide some structural stability here. So I think I'm going to try to get the best of both worlds by just taking a really sharp knife and cutting at a slight angle. Okay? Now, before I do that, let's talk about choices. My friend made me these. They're supposed to be vortex generators. They're except that they're like for a plane that's a million times bigger. So I took those and trimmed them down, and I came up with this Fowler flap hinge. And I just trimmed them down, and I made it so that it'll pull out and away. That was super simple, and it worked pretty good. Okay, this will give me a lot of contact area too. Alternately, there's these, which I would just be using 2 of them, and you can see it's going to create a pretty big opening. Okay, and then the larger ones, this would go on the actual fuse. So this would be on the wing part, and then this would be on the flap part. And so then I would be able to hook onto this as a control arm as well. Now this I really like, but it's going to be pretty heavy. And so I'll show you the part numbers. This is the Hobby King part numbers. They come in a pack of 10, and they're attached to the rear half. And then these are also from Hobby King. And here's the part number for those. And so I'd be using 2 of those. Now I may use these also for adapting the wire to the control surface. I a lot of times will use these, but you need a little bit more material so that you can protrude them in, especially on a Fowler flap, because you'd be putting them in a V configuration and allowing the flap to pull out and away. Again, we lose too much structural integrity on this application to really do a true Fowler flap given the thickness of the wing. And I have no interest in reinforcing this wing beyond what it's already reinforced. And I don't really think it needs it either. So that being understood, regular hinge doesn't work. We don't really need this type of hinge tape. We can just use regular tape. These are way too big. These are too big. CA hinges aren't going to work. Fowler flap hinges from Dynam are really nice, but they're too big. These are too big. They're just too thick, and they stand up way too tall. These stand out way too far. So that leaves us with the 2 choices plus the ones that my buddy made me on his 3D printer. And so I'm going to put the rest of this crap away, and I'll come right back. Alright, so I got that stuff cleared out of the way. And I just sit and look at these little hinge systems, and I think, that's really cool. That would be really neat. But I don't know how practical it's going to be. Because by the time you actually subject this wing to having 2 hinge points on the ends, potentially 3 in the middle, plus then that leaves me in one nasty spot, and that is I didn't do 2 servos. I'm just doing the 1 because the servo is way too big to do 2. So what that means is I'm going to be wholly dependent on 1 rod going back. It's just going to be shaped like an L, and it's going to come across and go up, and then there'll be something bent up out of it, and we'll move that to manipulate the flaps, similar to the flaps on this. These are split flaps, similar to the flaps that I did on my Consendo up there, and similar to the flaps on the Mini Moa. They're actually separate, so I could do a Fowler configuration if we were doing that, but we're not. So we're pretty much stuck with our choice, and our choice is, even though these are really cool, I just don't think it's practical in this application. So I'm just going to basically cut it somewhat square and just be done with it. I'm just going to stop overthinking it. So I want to make sure I hit the panel line up above and below, and this is kind of a challenging task. So you just kind of have to guess initially. You see I made it. Okay, then you have to stay square. Stupid thing rolled on me. So now I'm doing about a halfway plunge cut right now. So sorry about all that talk about Fowler flaps, guys. I know I wet everybody's whistle. Okay, Okay, so I cut it about halfway to 2/3 of the way. Now I'm just folding it down. And to be honest with you, right there looks pretty awesome as it is, except for this part where I screwed up. So the way I'm going to resolve that is I'm just going to very gently slice, and then I'm going to come back in and just very gently continue to cut back to the center. And then I'm going to pull out that little chunk, and it's just going to go away. And nobody's going to know what happened except for you and I and the other 400 people in 10 years that watch this video. Okay? So now, one thing you can do that does work pretty good is if you get a rough edge like that you screw up on, take a sanding block and work down the length. It helps actually a lot. Okay, now one other detail that I must say is while this is still attached, now is a pretty good time to wipe this with alcohol and just get it hinged. Okay, because it's actually a lot harder to hinge later than it is to hinge now. I refilled my alcohol again, which I always do. Actually got this bottle from work, but it was empty at the time. So I'm going to grab my Q-tip here. You guys know me, I like my Q-tips. I had looked down and saw a Q-tip in the garbage can, and it kind of grossed me out because it was like bright yellow. And I said, oh gross, whose ears? Oh, that's yellow paint. Sorry, I figured I'd add that in there in case anybody's eating dinner. Okay, so now that we've got that wiped down, I'll just grab a little piece of just this here, whatever this is, paper towel. Really get it dry. Remember, kicker is going to compromise our seal here, so be prepared to be careful about kicker. Okay, also those little lines are not going to help anything. See these little bumps, these little mold release bumps or whatever they are, you gotta kind of try to get them off of there. I think the easier way to do that is going to be to heat the back end of a knife. I'm going to try this. See, I have heat shrink on there. It works pretty nice. I'm just heating it, and then I'm going to just push in. That worked pretty decent. Now, I want to put a piece of tape. This tape is pretty awesome actually, so I'm going to use it. You can use fiber reinforced tape if you really want to waste your time. Okay, I just ripped it a little bit longer than it needs to be so that I can cut off my fingerprints, preferably. Okay, so we cut the finger. Oh, I hate it when it sticks to me like that. Dang it. Okay, so I got both ends of excess. I'm just going to touch this a little bit with my fingertips. Now the other thing too, guys, is we saved a ton of weight by not doing Fowler flaps. A ton of weight. See what I'm doing here? I'm going to actually cut this down. Never mind. This piece is garbage. It's ticking me off, so I'm going to throw it away in the garbage can right now. Get off my finger. We're going to try that again, because that was not very skilled maneuver. Okay, so I'm just going to stick this down here. I'll just gauge. Okay, so like about 1 fist worth. Okay. Cut it. Now cut it right here. And then let's try to apply this. That looked pretty imprecise because it was. Now I'm going to cut my seam again. Okay. Now I'm going to take my hot knife and I'm going to get it hot. And I'm going to take my alcohol dipped thingy-mabobber. Where's my alcohol dipped thing? Yeah, this is. And I'm going to clean it real quick while it's warm. Okay. Get get it warm. Don't get it blazing hot. Now I'm going to cut an opening here. Okay. I'm creating a gap is what I'm doing, guys. Because that knife is so dang sharp, the new one, that you're probably... Okay. There you go. Now you got a gap. So now on the other side, you've got this tape here that's excess. This is why you need a new X-Acto knife for this process. Because there ain't no way you're going to do that with an old X-Acto knife. In fact, that's a good way to chop suey, so be careful. Okay, you could flatten that if you wanted now. Hopefully I've got a clean one up here. This one's pretty clean. I got this surface is pretty rough and good still. Just flattening it out a little bit. Doesn't take a lot of material coming off of there for it to work smoothly. You just don't want to leave it full because it won't ever close all the way then. Okay. So now it closes. And we may need to do a little bit more tape. But I think for now we're probably okay. Remember, we're going to have to put a wire in here. And then we'll have to relieve this area here so that there's a place for the wire to pass through. And the wire needs to be right at the bottom. Okay, cool. So now we're going to jump onto the other side. And we're going to cut it. Just like we did this. This time I'm going to do it a little different though. I'm going to just see if my blade's coming through where I want it. Looks like it did. Because I can see better here. Yeah, that's pretty good. Okay, now I'm going to plunge cut. I'm going to make sure I don't hurt myself here. Okay, stopping just shy of the home run there. And then just give it a nice fold. This side we didn't screw up near as much, so we should have an easier time with it. But I still need to open up the pocket on the inside, so we're going to do that right now. 1, 2, 3, 4, okay. That worked really sharp that time. Okay, cool. So now we're going to do the same thing we did before. Well, that's about a fist width. Just cut that. Oh, that son of a gun. Let's see if it comes off clean. And it did. So we're still okay. Way long though. Oh shoot, we forgot to take our edges down. But you know what? I forgot to tape this. I forgot to tape this the last time too. And I totally forgot. That was all. So I'm going to tape it now. I kind of gave up on worrying about that on the lights. And that was to help protect the wires from the environment. Okay, so let's try this again. 1 fist width. That son of a gun fell down again. And I forgot to push down little bumps again. So we'll see if we can get this thing to not fall this time. And it did immediately. I'm just going to try it without heating it this time. Well, that was pretty good actually. The heat just adds a little bit more risk to the operation, but it should hypothetically give us a better result. I don't know if I think it gave us that much better results. So my assessment says don't do it. Okay. surprisingly difficult to apply tape in a way that's successful on these models. Hey, you know what else I didn't do on this side, guys? But I guess we'll just wait and see if it's an issue. I did not use alcohol to clean that. Okay, so now I'm going to cut down and I'm going to cut over to take this little chunk out. There it is. Got it. Okay, cool. So now the next part is going to be actually surprisingly easy. It always seems to go pretty smooth compared to all the rest of the ridiculous millions of steps that we do on these projects. Okay, I'll fold that down all the way. I guess I need to probably tame this hinge a little bit like I did the other side. Now a lot of times, guys, I will actually apply a piece of tape here too, but I found that sometimes that just makes the hinge work really nasty. So I'm thinking I'm going to stay away from that on this plane for weight savings and just to learn from my own stupidity. So at this point now we need to get a wire to go from the left to the right flap, and it's going to articulate the flaps in unison. So that's our next step. So let's grab some wire and get that going. So this wire that I use for this type of project is usually just this KS Precision material, but you could use something else if you wanted. This is probably the smallest size. Is 500. It's 0.64 millimeters. What size is this? This one is 0.84. Okay, so we're going to go with the smallest pieces that I have, which would be this. Now you could use carbon fiber or something else if you want. Okay, so just give you a shot of this. This is available at your local hobby shops. Okay. So I always seem to... We'll see if this works. This might be a little too thin. I don't know, that looks pretty close to the control surfaces there. That just doesn't seem like it's going to cut it. Because you gotta have more strength than that. So I'm going to take this short piece here. I don't think that stuff is hard enough. I don't think it's going to work. So I'm going to go up to the 0.81 millimeter, 0.32 inch. And I'm going to just stick this stuff by the wayside. This is just way, way, way too thin. It's going to be not sturdy enough in my opinion. Okay, so the first thing you got to do with this stuff is make sure your ends are prepared. Okay, so that's good stuff. Pretty toasty right now. Okay, seems like we got a little bit of a bend there. No big deal. Let's figure on how much we think we need. I think we need about that much. Now, ideally, you'd have it just go straight. Okay, so you'll transfer the load like this, kind of out midway, not right on the edge because it may not work all the way. You go out a little bit further than you think because you almost always seem to need to go out a little bit further. So if I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we'll go 8 out on each side. Okay, so over here, so let's go 1, 2. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 1 past the little mold release on this side. I'm just going to grab a sticky note to hold our position. Okay, so this is where I want this one to go. I'm going to measure and see if they're even. They may not be even. Should be just under. So 2 inches. So just under 2 inches. So just under 2 inches would be this one. So 1 passed as well. So let's double check our measurement. Okay. And those things will come off without screwing up your finish. So like 1 7/8. It's like it's just a little bit more. It doesn't matter that much. It's not that critical. Okay, so remember, once we get inside, we have to have the mechanism to actually make this do something. So we're going to have the servo centrally located-ish. So you're going to want to have your articulation point somewhere over here. It's like in this general vicinity. So I'm just going to mark it with my thumbnail. Okay, so you see that little scrape mark on there. So now, when I get to the little scrape mark, I want to go straight at 90 degrees here. So with the folded, okay, so now we have our first 90. Okay, then we want to double back. We want to give ourselves a little bit of room to work with. And there are a lot of ways you can do this and have success. I'm just going to show you the way I'm doing it. You can do it your own way if you don't like this. I'm making basically a little eyelet, which I'm going to spin. The other way you can do it is you can actually do it like this, and then you can slip your control arm through. Let's try that first. You do have to have fairly tight bends for that to work, otherwise it likes to slip, I've found and learned. Okay, so now this is a very critical bend here. So I didn't get it very square, as you can see. So now I must straighten it. Okay, so it's not square yet, it's getting closer. Okay, so that's fairly close. Okay, so as you can see, this is how the flaps are going to articulate. Okay, and we got a little bit of wiggle room, but not tons. Okay, so I'm holding this. Now this needs to be very, very close to the other side. Okay, so I'm just folding it. And that's pretty good, actually. That's pretty close. So now I can bring this back to where I have a little bit more material to work with. Okay, so as you can see, the flaps are going to deploy contingent on the position of this rod. Okay? And we're getting close to running out of memory. I'm kind of hoping we can get this portion done. Okay, so we got about 1 inch of material. And I'll just mark this and then we can cut it real quick. Try not to cut them with your side cutters because you'll just destroy your side cutters, guys. This small, you can probably get away with something like that, cutting it. But I'm telling you, just don't do it. It's not worth it. Okay. Alright, so there's our mechanism, guys. Letting that cool before we put it up against the foam. And that's going to work nicely. Now, you can run this at a bit of an angle if you want, but I found that it works fine either way. And you see how that mechanism is going to work? It's going to work awesome is how it's going to work. And we'll throw a little bit of tape in this area to kind of hold it down and make it secure. Guys, we got to go to another video. This is part 3 of the flaps mod. Thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll have more action coming at you very soon. Stay tuned.